Is there no peace without war? Look at a map of Europe in 1914, now 1919, now 1946, now 1992. Same continent, 4 different sets of lines. Every redrawing happened the same way. Not through negotiation, not through referendum. A war ended, and someone had to decide what the map looked like now. So, was there another way? Or has real peace, the kind that lasts generations, always been something that arrives after the shooting stops and never quite arrives without it? Start with Westphalia, 1648. Before it, the Holy Roman Empire was a patchwork of principalities where your prince's religion determined yours, and religious war was a permanent background condition. The 30 Years' War killed between 4 and 8 million people. In parts of Germany, a third of the population died. Villages weren't depopulated, they were erased so completely that forests grew back over the fields. Out of that came state sovereignty, the idea that a state's internal affairs are its own business, that borders mean something. It's the foundation of the modern international system. The UN Charter is Westphalia, with better paperwork. It took 30 years of the worst violence Europe had seen to produce it. Nobody sat down in 1618 and reasoned their way to it. It was extracted through exhaustion, what everyone could finally agree to after running out of the capacity to disagree. That's the pattern. Once you see it everywhere. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 produced a century of relative great power peace. It followed 23 years of Napoleonic War. The concert of Europe collapsed into World War I. World War I produced the League of Nations. The League collapsed into World War II. World War II produced the UN, Bretton Woods, NATO, and eventually the European Union, the most ambitious peace architecture in human history. Every one of those institutions is a scar. They aren't built on good ideas, they're built on mass graves. 3 mechanisms, none of them comfortable. Information, war is a bargaining failure. 2 sides dispute territory, resources, status. In principle, there's always a deal both would prefer over fighting. Because fighting is expensive and destroys the thing you're fighting over. So why fight? Because both sides think they'd win, and neither can prove it. Every state has an incentive to overstate its strength. If I tell you my army is stronger than yours, you have no reason to believe me. I'd say that regardless. War settles it. Brutally, expensively, definitively, it's the world's most costly method of finding out who was right about who was stronger. Once that's on the table, the deal that was always available becomes acceptable. That's what a peace treaty is. The deal you could have made before, signed after you paid enormous cost to learn, you should have taken it. Commitment. Even if both sides know the truth, how do I know you'll keep your word? Say I'm powerful now and you're weak. You offer me a deal, but in 20 years you'll be stronger, and nothing stops you from tearing it up then. So the deal isn't worth signing, and the rational move is to attack you now, while I still can. That problem has no clean solution short of something that changes the incentives. Usually that something is war. After a war, you get occupation, disarmament, imposed constitutions, permanent foreign bases. The loser's ability to defect is physically removed. Germany and Japan didn't become peaceful democracies because someone made a persuasive argument. They became peaceful democracies because they were occupied, restructured, and embedded in arrangements that made defection impossible. Legitimacy before a war, the existing order, however unjust, has defenders. People whose status and wealth depend on it. They hold veto power over reform. War kills them, bankrupts them, or discredits them so thoroughly nobody will follow them. The European aristocracy didn't vote itself out of power. It got machine-gunned in Flanders and then inflated out of existence in the 1920s. British women didn't get the vote in 1918 because Parliament had a change of heart. They got it because the war made the old arguments unsustainable, and the men making them were dead or discredited. War doesn't just change what people believe. It changes who's in the room. That's the depressing version. Now take it apart. But claim peace requires war looks at every peace we've had, notes they followed wars, and concludes war caused them. But we've only run this experiment under one set of conditions. For almost all of history, war was cheap enough to be usable. Not cheap, absolutely cheap relative to the prize. Conquer a province, extract its wealth for a century, and the campaign penciled out. That math changed twice. First, nuclear weapons. Between great powers, war stopped being a way to gain things and became a way to lose everything. And the great powers stopped fighting each other. Not because they got nicer, because the arithmetic broke. The Cold War was the first time 2 hegemonic rivals sat across from each other for 4 decades and didn't have their war. Second, economics. Modern wealth isn't land. You can conquer a province. You cannot conquer a semiconductor supply chain, or a software company, or the trust of capital markets. Take Silicon Valley by force, and you've captured buildings. The value walks out the door. Then there's survivorship bias. We remember the pieces that followed wars because those are the famous ones. We don't notice the disputes that resolved quietly, because nothing that doesn't happen makes it into the history books. The Norway-Sweden separation in 1905 could easily have been a war. Nobody's heard of it precisely because it wasn't. Britain and the United States had a long history of shooting at each other, and they conducted a full hegemonic transition, the most war-prone event in international relations without a shot. And the European coal and steel community signed in 1951. Yes, it followed a war, but the mechanism wasn't war. It was Monnet and Schuman tangling the coal and steel industries of France and Germany together so thoroughly that a future war became logistically impossible. That's not peace extracted by exhaustion. That's peace designed. The thesis is wrong, but it's wrong in an interesting way. War isn't what produces peace. War produces the thing peace actually requires, a reason for the powerful to accept a limit on themselves. That's the scarce resource, not goodwill, not treaties, the willingness of the strong party to be bound. And one thing reliably produces it, the credible experience of catastrophe. Either you just survived one, or you can vividly imagine the next. The second option doesn't require the war to happen. It requires the war to be believable. That's nuclear deterrence. That's the entire post-1945 architecture built by people with the catastrophe fresh in memory, designed to keep that memory operational after the witnesses died. Which raises the real question. Memory decays. The people who built the post-war order are gone. The last generation with a personal memory of total war is nearly gone. And the institutions they built are visibly under strain, not because anyone defeated them, but because the fear that motivated them faded, and nobody can quite remember what they were for. So the honest version isn't, is there peace without war? It's, can a society sustain the discipline peace requires on inherited memory alone? Every generation that answers yes is running an experiment. Every generation that answers no, usually without saying so, usually by quietly letting the institutions rot, is running a different one. We're running one right now. The map of Europe changed 4 times in a century. Every time, a war changed it. Then it stopped. Not because anyone solved human nature. Because for 80 years, enough people in enough rooms remembered what the alternative cost and accepted limits on themselves rather than find out again. That's not peace as an achievement. That's peace as a maintenance problem. And maintenance is something you can stop doing at any time for no reason at all, just by forgetting why you started.